Rugged cross. Hang on one sec. Alright, sorry, we were getting someone to do the words. On a hill far away stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame. And I love that old cross, where the dearest and best for a world of lost sinners was slain. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged
I believe you are. It's a new horizon, and I'm set on you. And you meet me here today with mercies that are new. Oh, all my fears and doubts, Lord, they can all come true, because they can't stay long when I am here with you. Oh, it's a new horizon, and I'm set on you. And you meet me here today, mercies that are new. Oh, all my fears and doubts, Lord, they can all come true, because they can't stay long when I believe you are the way, the truth, the life. I believe you are the way, the truth, the life. I believe you are.
All right, thanks for singing. You may be seated. At this time, we have Pastor Mike and his message here for us this morning.
Money one time. Why? Because being a steward is more. God's given you abilities. God's given you lots of pieces of your life that are to be stewarded, to be used for Him. It is probably one of the most misunderstood teachings is about giving. Now, I want to just give you some myths before I read this Matthew 6:21. This is one of the myths. My possessions belong to me. Now, I just want you to think about this. If you are God's and everything you own are God's, I'm not going to tell you this morning that 10% of your money is God's. Why? 100% of it is. Everything we have is God's. What I do with my money, what I do with my life, If there is a God and he created this world and he created everything, everything is his. Here's another myth. I can't afford to give. If I give, I'll go in the hole financially. I just want to tell you, I believe that there are lots of people who would like to give or be a giver who have probably made decisions that have put them in financial holes, that have bound them up. The Bible tells us that we are what? We are slave to the lender. And because of decisions we've made, and I would just tell you, as a church, one of our goals is to be debt-free. I believe that each family should have that goal. I want to be debt-free. I don't want to owe anybody any money. And when you can be debt-free, it brings about what? Freedom. Because I believe that there's lots of times, like my wife, she wants to give to people in need. She wants to give to people, someone's sick and she wants to send them a gift. If Kathy could be blessed with anything, it would be just like extra money to give. And so she is the giver in our family, and she will give till it hurts, both of us. All right. She has the heart of a giver, and she would give her last dime. Here's another myth. My attitude towards money and giving has no relationship with my spiritual growth in life. Listen, money's nothing. It really is. The older I get, the longer I go, the more I realize that money is just a tool. The more I spend, or the more I'm around people, and I see the misery that money brings. I mean, it's the new car that you're so worried about getting a scratch on. It's the, it's the house and all the stuff, and it's the business and it's all the stuff and all the worry and the years it takes off your life, just having more and more and more, and it never is enough. It's just a tool. You can't take it with you. And so we need to be wise about our attitude towards money does have a relationship with our spiritual growth. And then this, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, if I give my money here, we can't trust you. We can't trust churches. We can't trust people with, I need to control my money. I just want to tell you, for all the people who you've given money to a good cause, to a church, and they have used it wrong, don't think for 1 minute that God's like, oh, I'm not going to bless you because they did something wrong with what you gave. That's not a part of what we worry about. There are missionaries that we've supported that we stopped supporting, but for a good while I was like, what are they doing with what we're giving them? God didn't look down and was like, oh, you guys aren't being blessed because you gave. And so we need to be careful to think it's about our hearts. And this is what he says here in Matthew chapter 6, verse number 21. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Speaking of money, where your treasure is, it's where your heart will be also. Now, I know a lot of times preachers will talk about tithe, and it's not a word that is liked. And I just want to tell you, some preachers will say, "Hey, until you can tithe, just give a tithe. Make your tithe 5%." I just want to tell you, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I just want to tell you why. Because it's a mathematical impossibility. Because tithe just means 10%. That's all it means. And so you can't say, hey, make your tithe 5%. Well, then it's not a tithe. And I'm not saying, honestly, I just want to tell everyone here, I don't know what people give. I don't care what people give. God always takes care of us. You, as you come to this church, it's between you and God. I am free from what you give. I just don't want you to be robbed. I don't want you to be robbed of being a part of a blessing, of coming along and, it's kind of like, hey, someone's carrying something and it's heavy, and you see three guys and you're like, man, I want to go and I want to grab part of that. I know this seems strange, but a lot of my life is at funerals, and I've seen before where like a casket was heavy, and there were people who had to run over and take part. They're like, I want part in this. I don't want them to carry it alone. That is what a church is about. Like, hey, no one here should carry the load alone. It's a church family, all giving towards the same cause for the same purpose. Now, I want to just talk about this number, the 10th, and what it means. Really, a 10th is the number 10, and in the Bible, 10 represents testing. And you get your heart tested. Daniel was tested 10 days. In the book of Revelation, it reads this in Revelation 2:10, ye shall have tribulation 10 days. The children of Israel, when they were in the wilderness, they were tried 10 times. So you're going to start seeing this theme of 10. It's always in 10. 10 commandments. Just over and over, you'll see this 10. Another story of 10. Jacob's wages, he was working for a wife, and it was changed. Can you guess how many times? 10 times. Now, one of the most famous times you hear about the number 10, 10 Commandments is one. And how about the 10 plagues? There were 10 plagues that hit Egypt. And so you could look at it like, hey, this was for Israel, but the 10 plagues were not for Israel, was it? The 10 plagues was for Egypt. And you could look at it like this, the 10 plagues were for whose heart? Pharaoh's heart. The Bible says that his heart was hardened. What was it hardened by? These plagues that kept coming. Plague after plague. And it was a testing. And you will find in the Bible that it's just a test. And really, I just want to tell you, 10, 20, whatever percent it is, it's really a test of our hearts. Because I always see that God blesses and He always has taken care of our family. I'm going to share some stories about that. But you don't get to see the supernatural unless you do some things by faith. Now, this is what people will say to me sometimes. Pastor Mike, the tithe is the law. Now, I always tell them this first. I said, say this statement with me. Jesus died on the cross so I wouldn't have to give anymore. Is that a powerful statement? Hey, Jesus died for me so that I would not have to give. I don't think that was God's plan. I don't think God was saying, hey, I'm dying so you're not under the law. But in all reality, and you don't need to turn there, but in Genesis 14, you can look it up later, but Genesis 14, verse 19, Abraham is saving his nephew Lot. And he comes out after saving his nephew Lot, and he gives money to this priest by the name of Melchizedek. And he was an Old Testament picture of Christ. I really don't know, theologians fight about who this was. I believe it was Jesus pre-incarnate. But Abraham gives a tenth of all the spoils to this priest. Now, I just want you to think about this. What did that guy do with that money? I don't even know where he was at or what he was doing. It didn't matter to Abraham. Abraham's like, man, I get to keep 90%. And I'm just going to give you a tenth. It was 500 years before the law. It was 500 years before Moses ever put it in the law. Abraham gave a tenth. Not because he had to. And I just want to tell everyone here, you don't have to give. I'm not that kind of preacher where it's like, hey, you have to give. I always tell my kids, you get to. You don't have to sacrifice. You get to. You get to be a part of it. You don't have to. No one's going to look down on you. No one's going to know. No one cares. It's all between you and God. I remember I was visiting over in Urban Crest, and first of all, the cops stopped me, and they're like, hey, I don't know if you should be like door knocking here in Urban Crest. This is when we first moved in the area. Actually, the church was meeting in the Y, and I was like, well, actually, our church meets back here. And he's like, well, it can kind of be rough. He's like, look down here, and a guy had been shot and killed, 2 houses down. I was like, well, that's weird. He's like, yeah, he shot him with a high-powered rifle in his house. I was like, oh, okay, but we kept visiting. But I was knocking on a person's door there, and they're like, I will never go back to church. I was like, why? And they're like, well, the church we were at, things started to get tight. And so they put everybody's giving up on the wall. And you could kind of move up and down, based upon how much you gave. It was like it was either the wall of fame or shame, no matter what. And do you remember Jesus? Jesus talked about money more than anybody. There was a widow who came in, and she put in 2 mites, which wasn't very much. And God took notice that she gave more than all. Why? God understands percents. You see, someone here could give like, oh, I gave $10,000. But percent-wise, it wasn't that great of a gift because it wasn't a sacrifice. The widow comes in and she's like, I don't have much, but I want to give. God sees it. That's who we have to be worried about with giving. And so Abraham commenced it. Jacob, his son before the law, he continued it. He said this, Jacob says in Genesis 28:22, he says, I will surely give a tenth unto thee. And so he continues it. Moses puts it in the law. And so Moses in Leviticus 27 says, and all the tithe of the land, whether of the seed of the land or the fruit of the trees, is the Lord and is holy unto the Lord. And so Moses puts it in the law. Malachi, we're going to read here in a minute, confirms it. It's the last book of the Bible. And then Jesus talked about tithing. You want to talk about New Testament. He never said it was bad. He said in Matthew 23:23, these ought ye to have done and not leave the other undone. He was talking about the Pharisees. They were so particular about giving. And he's like, the Pharisees give, but their hearts are bad. God's more concerned with your heart. Giving's really a position of the heart. I want you to think about this. One of the things, don't you hate when you're working with your kids and they're, with their brothers and sisters and they're stingy? I mean, who wants their kids to grow up and be stingy? Hey, they're stingy with what they give. Some of the most proud time moments in your life, hey, your kid goes to school and you're you find out that they were, what? Giving away part of their lunch. They're like, hey, there was a kid who needed lunch. At one of my kids' school, there's a kid, he can only eat certain things because of diet, and sometimes if he has those certain things, he'll give it away. Keandre, one of the things I love about Keandre is we have to guard what he takes to school because he would give away everything. He's generous. At what point does being generous not a good and beautiful thing? When does being stingy ever look good? When does being a greedy person ever look good? I want to tell you where it will not look good. When you stand before God one day. And He's like, you were greedy. All you cared about was your money. The Bible speaks about money becoming a god. And so if all these people continued it, confirmed it, commended it, who are we to cancel it? I'll give you another picture. If I said it's Old Testament, what are some other things that are in the Old Testament? Stealing. Would your kids be like, yeah, but Dad, that is Old Testament. Old Testament is stealing. No, if it was good, there was a principle that was set up for it, and there's a reason why we do what we do. There are a few people who want to say, hey, in the New Testament, they changed giving. Do you want to hear how the New Testament church did giving? They began to sell their properties. They began to sell everything, and they all dropped it into one pot. Like everybody just gave all the money, and it was like being distributed as they need it. And so I always tell the person who wants to be like, no, I'm like a New Testament. I'm like, bring it all in. We'll all drop it in the pot and we'll distribute it. Or you can go with, a principle that was set out through the Bible. Now, I don't think like 10% is it, because we'll read about that. But turn, if you would, with me to 2 Corinthians chapter 9. 2 Corinthians chapter 9. Remember how we said it makes us proud when our kids are what? Generous. When they give away what they have. I will tell you, sometimes it's annoying when it's like, hey, I just got them that, and then they give away that. But we've always taught our kids, we want our kids to be generous. And in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse number 7, it reads this: every man according as he purpose in his heart, so let him give, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loveth a cheerful giver. I just want to tell you, it's not telling you here not to give if you've got a bad heart. It's saying don't have a bad heart about giving. You shouldn't give grudgingly or of necessity. We haven't done the offering plates. We're going to start passing the offering plates again, not because I think it's going to make our giving go up. Our giving hasn't. I don't even think it went down. I'm not saying anything like that. I just like that part of the service. We passed, before we were worried about COVID and things like that. And now pretty much everybody's got it or had it. And so that was something, that was a part of our service, was like we passed the offering plate and people were able to at least get that picture of, this is a part of my sacrifice to God. But Kathy I told you Kathy's the giver and I struggle. I always want to give to our local church because I believe that's what the Bible teaches, but we'll be places and she'll be like, don't you have some cash? I'm like, maybe. I'm like looking out. God always gets me when I go out, because it's like I go out, the offering plate gets passed around, I reach into my pocket, and I'm like, it's the only time I have a big bill. I'm like, hey, can you break this? She's like, no, I'm not breaking that. You're just putting it in. And I'm like, okay. And then sometimes with the wrong heart, it's like, here. I was like, but the Bible says don't do it what? Grudgingly. He's not saying don't do it. He's just saying get your heart right. Why? Isn't it so much more a blessing when you give and you're happy about what you're giving? Honestly, the heart of a true giver is this: I wish I could give more. Why? Because of love. Your kids one day, your kids go to college and maybe you help your kids with college. Because you love your kids, this is your heart. I wish I could help them with more. I wish I could do more for them. Do you know with giving at church, that should be the heart? I want to do more. I want to I want to be able to give and give towards the Lord's work. When you give here, your giving goes towards people being saved. Your giving goes towards helping widows sometimes and helping those who are in need. Your giving goes towards the building you meet in and are a part of. Your giving goes to missionaries who are around the world. Your giving gets used for the Lord. And so our heart should be, man, I want to give. Now in 1 Corinthians 16, he says, now concerning the collection for the saints, as I have given order to the churches of Galatia, even so do ye upon the first day of the week. That is when we're supposed to bring it in. And we're going to read that you bring it into what? The storehouse. Now, is God a giving God? Probably the most famous verse in the Bible. For God so loved the world that he, what did he do? He gave. He gave way more than you could ever ask for in money. He gave his only begotten Son. What a little thing. Now I want to give this illustration. I don't think there's any young people in here. Most of them are at the next service. But I don't know about you guys, but when I think about giving, I think that God has given us everything. And I stopped at good old McDonald's. I don't know. And so I want to just give you this illustration. You know, I don't know if you've ever done this with your kids, but you take your kids to McDonald's. And you're like, at the time, my wife's always like this. She's never hungry when we're ordering. Only hungry when I get it. All right? I mean, she never wants a burger. She only wants a bite of mine. All right? She never wants a French fry. No, I don't want any French fries. I'm trying to be good. You just want half of mine. So I just order bigger portions now, all right? Like, she's like, if they had the super size, I would still supersize it. I'm like, give me large, extra large, whatever the biggest size you can, because my wife, she's not eating these right now. All right? She's only eating mine. They don't have calories. But you go out with your kids, you buy them some food, you're there at the window, and you get that bag and you pass it over to your kid. And they start eating. And then you're like, hey, they didn't have French fries. It was too early in the morning. And I was just going to save it all, but I ate some. So it was a rough illustration. So they didn't have French fries. And so your kid starts eating his hash brown. And you're like, could I have a bite? Could you break me off a piece? And they're like, no, you're not getting a piece of this. It's mine. My kids will say to me sometimes, why didn't you order your own? I just want to tell you, a flood of emotions come over me at that time. As I sit in my car, that I paid for the gas, I paid for their food, everything in their life I have paid for. And so a lot of bad emotions come over me. And I'm like, you're not going to give me a few of those fries? Everything I've given you is mine. You're mine. When you come to this in the New Testament and you read about Jesus and him giving his own son for us, and he says, I just want a little back to further my work. What a little thing. It's really not a burden. Some of my kids I've taught to be better givers than others. Like some of my kids would be like, oh, here's the whole thing, Some of them are like, they pick like one fry out. And they're like, here. It's always like some wrinkly, like if it's the worst fry in there, that's it. They're like, I'm like, thank you, son. And I'm like, you're such a giver. Is that really how we want to be with God? He didn't keep anything. He didn't keep anything from us. He didn't hold anything back from us. He is a giving God. And to think that I would have a heart where I want to hold back from this giving God who loves us. Listen, love will cause you to give your time to Christ. When you fall in love with Jesus, you want to give your time. Love will cause you to give your abilities. When you love God, when you love His work, you'll say, hey, I can do a little construction, at our church. I can do a little this. I could help out on the security team. I could work in the nursery. It will cause you. Love will always cause you to give because that's what love does. It gives. And Christ showed us that on the cross. He blesses us with salvation that we can share the good news with others. He blesses us with abilities and spiritual gifts to profit others. He blesses us with finances that we might bless the Lord's work in others. Now, I wanted you to turn to Malachi Chapter 3, if you would. Malachi Chapter 3. It is the last book of the Old Testament. I had someone tell me, in the Old Testament they gave like fruit and whatever like things that they had. It was an agricultural society. That was the money of the day was, here I have grain. I can, there wasn't like a lot of money floating around. And so it was the economy of their society. And why do we give money? Because it's the economy of our society. It's what we use. And so Malachi chapter 3, the Bible says, verse number 6, "For I am the Lord, I change not." I just want to tell you, I'm so thankful that God does not change. He is a God that is sure when He makes these promises to us, they continue. He's not trying to burden people here that we'll read about here in verse number 8. It says this, "Will a man rob God? Yet ye say, yet ye have robbed me. But ye say, wherein have we robbed thee? In tithes and offerings." He's like, hey, would a man really rob God? If Jesus showed up today, is anybody hitting him up and like running off with something that he has? No. But God's telling him here, children of Israel, you have robbed me, and it's in tithes and offerings. He said, ye are cursed with a curse, for ye have robbed me, even this whole nation. Now, I just want to tell you, God's not like cursing them. They are bringing a curse upon them. The person who maybe has like some kind of bad habit. I know people sometimes whatever habit they choose, but sometimes that habit causes cancer or causes whatever. It's not like God's bringing a curse upon them. They're bringing it upon themselves. We lied to for years, about tobacco and smoking and things that cause cancer and, chewing, just all those different things, what people choose to do. I honestly, just like giving, that's up to you. But when something happens that is associated with that, you're not like, this is God's fault. He's not the one cursing here. They're bringing something upon themselves, but they have this option here in verse 10. "Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse." The New Testament storehouse is the church. And then he says this, "That there may be meat in mine house. Prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing that there shall not be room enough to receive it." This is where I think you rob God. He wants to open those windows and those blessings. Blessings that come in all kinds of shapes or forms. It's not like, oh, you give and you're going to be like blessed financially. You give and you're going to get tenfold back. You're going to be rich. I would love to tell everybody, hey, every time you give, money here, it's going to come back tenfold. Like, you guys would be given like nobody's business if that really was the case. But the windows of heaven, there's a lot bigger blessings than just money. Really, money doesn't really mean much. He said, I will open the windows of heaven. And he said this, prove me. Just try me. If you would just try me and see what would happen, I will open you up some windows and there will not be room enough to receive it. Verse number 11, and I will rebuke the devourer for your sake, and he shall destroy the fruits, and he shall not destroy the fruits of your ground. Neither shall your vine cast her fruit before the time in the field, saith the Lord of hosts. And all nations shall call you blessed. Now, here I just want to give personal testimony. From the time my dad kind of got saved, and they kind of gave, I believe, sometimes giving in a legalistic form, like it was just like it was religion and not we get to do it. It was like we have to. If you, how I grew up when we started getting a little bit older after my dad got saved is like we got birthday money, and my dad'd be like, hey, take that tithe out of that birthday money. And my dad did different things. I remember one time when I graduated, he said, hey, you're going to start paying, giving some money here because you're graduated, you got a good job, and you're going to start paying a little bit of monthly. And what really wasn't very much. He's like, but I'm going to save it up for you, and then I'm going to use it for something for you. I was like, yeah, it's like investing, Here, Dad, here's the money. I think I even gave him extra sometimes. I'm like, I'm just getting this back. And then I remember one day he came in. He's like, hey, I just want to tell you, I blessed you today. I was like, how'd you do that? He's like, this missionary came in, and he was going to this place, and I gave all your money. I was like, man, that must have felt good, Dad, like to take all my money and bless me. And so that was kind of, but now looking back, honestly, I'm thankful for it. But I want to just share this story about proving the Lord. So I was 18 or 19 years old, and the church was they were trying to build a new building because they had so many people at the church. There was a need for it. It wasn't one of these churches that like, hey, we're going to build just to build, we're going to waste money. It was a good church. Sometimes people build, I don't even know why they're building. But in this church they were building, and they did a giving fund, and they're like, here, what would you commit to? And I remember, I'm a young guy, I'm working as a co-op at a computer company, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna give $100 a month towards the building fund. I just feel like that's gonna be good, for me. I'm 19, 20 years old, I'm working at this computer company. And I remember this day, because I remember the preacher, he reads it, and he's like, no one knew what you were giving. You wrote on your portion, and then you tore it off, and the portion, they wouldn't know who committed what. And so the preacher's reading off the commitments, this person's given, $50 a month, this person, you don't know who it is. He's just saying this was commitments that were made. And so it was just blind to him, to everybody. It's just between you and the Lord. But he read this one off. He said, man, this person said they're going to give $100 a week. And I was like looking down my thing, I was like, you are an idiot. I was like, God knows that, God, I'm not giving $100 a week. Like, why would I give $100 a week? I can't. And I remember having this battle with God. And I said, God, you know what? In the Bible, you said what? Prove me. And so I said, I've got so much money in the bank, I don't have enough to cover $100 a week. but you said, prove me. And I did it by accident. I'm not telling people to do this. I'm not telling you to write down right now. You would give whatever. I did it by accident, and you know my heart. But if you want me to continue, you need to supply the money. And so I remember I started giving $100 a week. And for me at that time, that was a lot of money. And it started to add up. And then my boss came in, and he said this. He said, I am leaving, and I know you are younger than everybody in our department. I know you don't have your degree, and there are people here with degrees, but I'm going to suggest that they make you the manager of this group at like 20 years old. And I'm like, that's never going to happen. A few weeks later, I was the manager of the group. Everybody there was like older than me. Everybody there had more education than me. Everybody there, I'm sure when they like report it to me, they're like, why are we reporting to this doofus? Like, why is he here? And the money that he gave me, and like when they told me, they're like, oh, this is going to be what you're making in salary and insurance. And I'm like, are you sure? Are you sure about this? And I just remembered this, like God speaking to my heart. You said, prove me. Listen, I promise you, when you give with a right heart, with the right attitude, God takes care of these things. I can't tell you how few cars, we've never had a lot of money since we've been in ministry. Honestly, a lot of times there's been times that we have struggled, but I can't tell you how many times someone would come up to me and say, hey, we had an extra car, could you guys use it? I'm like, yeah, we could use that. And I would drive it around until it fell apart or I wrecked it. All right. And so I don't know how many times, a hot water heater came out and $500 came in the mail. I don't know how many times, just different things. I think about the blessings for my kids, both of them. Trey's at college, really paying nothing right now because of scholarships, things like that. I think Lily, we were looking the other day, and Lord willing, she's going to be able. I'm thinking, blessings are way bigger than just to have a big bank account. There is something about being a generous giver. You are robbing yourself of the windows of heaven when you're like, I want to be stingy. I want to buy that extra thing. I want to get that extra stuff. When we have that heart, we miss out on what God could be doing. He wants to bless us. He wants those things, but you're robbing him of the opportunity. Why? Because you want to live like everybody else lives. You drive around, you see like the misery of people, like you talk to them, you talk about marriages and things, you start looking in the world and there's like just a lot of people, it's like this rat race that never ends. I love it when they're like, yeah, but I'm going to retire. Have you ever noticed like people are retiring older and older, and when they retire, they're going to do all these things. By the time you retire, you're so like beat up and out of shape and all these things, all these dreams of things that you wanted to do, you can't do because you spent yourself in that rat race. You got caught up in all the stuff. In the Bible, I talk sometimes about the verse that talks about, well done, thou good and faithful servant. How many people, that is what you want to hear when you get to heaven? Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Do you know how many times that appears in the Bible? It appears twice. It appears in the book of Matthew, chapter number 25. It appears when he's talking about talents. And so many people read Matthew chapter 25 and they're like, talents. They think it's an actual talent. It's not. It's money. And they were faithful with their money there in Matthew chapter 25. They were good stewards. And so those who managed well got more. And those who managed well, he said, well done. And there was one servant who didn't use his finances wisely. And in the story, he says, thou wicked and slothful servant. I couldn't even trust you with this. I couldn't trust you with finances. You were wicked and slothful. You go down that Matthew 25, and I want you to think of this. Verse number 35, it says, for I was hungered, and ye gave me meat. I was thirsty, and ye gave me drink. I was a stranger, and ye took me in. Naked, and ye clothed me. I was sick, and ye visited me. I was in prison, and ye came unto me. Do you know Jesus is telling them this? And their answer to them was, Lord, when did we see you? Do you know your giving through the church feeds people, helps the needy, does those things? And Jesus said, when I was that way, you were there for me. When I struggled with those things, you were there. I want to just leave with just this thought. It's easy to give. I don't know if you guys are like this, but I like to give, especially when it's not my own money. I don't know about you guys, but it's like, hey, you can bless somebody and it's not your money. Your attitude towards that is like, what if I said today, hey, I'm going to give everybody $500 and I want you to go out and like bless somebody and give somebody money. Some of you would keep it. But some of you would like, man, this is fun. Like, hey, oh, look, here's a needy person. Here's some money. Here's some money. If you would just look at your money like it's all his, it would always make giving easy. It would make giving to people easy. I want to offer you just these two challenges I always try to do. They say that in churches, only 3% of evangelicals tithe. If people in churches would sacrificially give, like missionaries, a missionary came Wednesday night. He's been a year trying to raise support. There's missionaries who are raising support for 5 years, tons of time to try to get out and share the gospel. There are people, we wouldn't need the government to feed people and do those things if churches were full and people were giving. That was God's plan for helping the needy and the poor. But I just want to give you just these two challenges. If you've never tithed in your whole life or anything like that, I would give you a 90-day challenge. If you would give consistently for 90 days, and you came back to me at the end of 90 days, and you said, Pastor Mike, I gave for 90 days, and I do not feel like God's opened the windows of heaven. I feel like it was a bad decision. We will write you a check for that amount back. No hard feelings. You can come to church every week. No one will ever know. I always offer that, but you can't do this. I gave cash, and it was about $500 a week, and if you could write me a check, Pastor Mike, I'm just sorry about your luck. You must record it, all right? It must be recorded if we're going to write you a check back. But honestly, we would do that. And then I always challenge the church. Next week, maybe you've never done it before, but I challenge you to give. The Bible says you've robbed me in tithes and offerings. Just start with something. Just start with some amount of giving. Just make it something that is a sacrifice. Honestly, I don't care. It's not about me. I'm not going to get a raise if our giving goes up. Our church has enough finances. I would love to be able to pay our building off in 7 years. There's things that I would love to be able to do at our church. but I really don't care, other than I don't want to see you miss out on what God has for you. He gave everything. And he's just expecting, it's like those French fries. He's just asking for a small portion back. I want to use it for the Lord and His